in my world. So just having to make sure that everything is accurate, everything is truthful.
Any comments from our fellow Zoomers? We'll get back to you. Maybe this will spark some other questions from you later. Our next question, and this is sort of a follow-on. It's a fair assumption that the explosion of social media platforms and their content, it has made investigating truthfulness, as we said, more time-consuming and more frustrating than ever. Can you give an example of how you've successfully dealt with this, particularly since the first of this year?
I'll start. Social media is a beast. And no, seriously, because in terms of content, a post is easy to create. And it's easy to create misinformation and misleading posts based off your own bias and agenda. I can't tell you how many times that I've seen, like, I'm pretty sure all of us on this Zoom call are familiar with memes and stuff, right? We know what they are, right? Right. So,
oh, yeah.
So a lot of people, and especially in this day and age, they get a lot of their information off of memes and these screenshots, and they just be all wrong. And so sometimes we'll see, and sometimes those memes, they go viral, which means they've been seen by hundreds and thousands and sometimes millions of people. And a lot of people are taking some of those things that are on those memes to be true, like information about COVID. I remember when the COVID outbreak first happened, they were saying that, oh, Black people couldn't get it. And clearly we know that's a lie now. That's not true. We see things about, political, what's the word I'm looking for? How things work in the world of politics, like in succession and things that the president can do, political action, things that are easy to say and easy to put out there. So once again, going back to the point that we made earlier, it's, really having to separate fact from fiction, and just, really to have and use that spirit of discernment to know what's real and what's not. And social media can get in the way of that because it's easy to take something based off of, everything you've already seen before, or things that are easily accessible.
Yeah. The spirit of discernment, I pray for that every day. We all should, I think. Karanja? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, can you restate the question for me, please?
Sure, you bet. It's a fair assumption that the explosion of social media platforms and their content has made investigating truthfulness more time-consuming and frustrating than ever. Can you give an example of how you have successfully dealt with this or confronted this?
Great, thanks. So the pandemic put us in a situation where we're a small business. And so our first deal was how we're going to stay in business. It was already a struggle, and then the pandemic comes in, and so you have to start cutting back. So then at a time where you bring up this particular subject matter, we're dealing with fewer people. And so obviously then I got to put in more hours and things like that. And I said to myself, man, this doesn't seem like a sentence that has an end to it. And so I found out about the Facebook grant. And really found out about it at the last moment and got it in. And as a result of that grant, I was able to get an amount of money that I then took to hire some people to help me specifically with social media. We didn't have a social media person. We were trying to deal with that through me learning it on the spot and our webmaster and stuff like that, because we pretty much have all freelancers, but we were able to hire a person fresh out of school, and when I think that's good actually, and so has brought a level of expertise and reliability to our social media coverage. I mean, we try to keep up to date. I'm 65 years old, and hey, I needed some fresh energy, some fresh knowledge base, and she's been able to bring that to us. And so as a result, then there are things now that we're starting to design to go out specifically for social media. Before, we would write stories, we would post those stories on the web, and then those stories would then be posted to our social media. Now, as a result of things that she's coming up with, we're creating things specifically for social media. And I also rely upon her in terms of, the credibility of the social media.
Let me give Kim a shot here, because I know, being in the medical field, there's a lot of misinformation that she's dealing with constantly related to COVID and possibly other things too.
We definitely are. I was actually just checking out the chat, and Terry made a great point. Is one thing about social media and that you can use it. It's good to be abreast of all of those trends, because you can use those same channels to get the real information out there and combat the rumors. That's what you need to know. I mean, I think we all saw that video that came out a few months ago with the doctors who were supposedly talking about, I think COVID-19 was fake. It was these esteemed doctors. And I think that you have to be aware, know what kind of information that you're putting out. And I know that I look at social media, like Montee said, it is a beast, but you can use it for your good and use it as a barometer of what people are really thinking and where your messages are hitting and where you're missing the mark.
Yeah.
I know we saw our visitation policy change that we had recently. We were checking our social pages to see, how were our patients responding. Last week we opened up our visitation. We loosened our restrictions. We'd been on restricted visitors since the can't talk today, since the coronavirus pandemic hit. So we had loosened our visitation rules last week, allowing one visitor per medical visit. And we were watching social media to see people's reaction.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and to make sure they understood the policy.
Yeah. Have you put some of your physicians in front of the media from time to time?
Absolutely. We're a big believer in spokespersons over statements. I think that builds trustworthiness. And I know we're going to talk about the trustworthiness of the media at some point, but I think having a trusted veteran physician out there giving medical advice definitely helps build that trust in the story and in the media. And it helps with our media partners too. They would rather talk to a physician who's doing this work day in and day out than a third party.
Sure. Karanja and Montee, you're on the other side. Have you had issues with that?
That being?
Well, just making sure that you get the information that you need from these providers, medical particularly, but not just limited to that.
It can be tough. I'm not gonna lie. It can be tough because a lot of it, is PR'd down. If that a word I can say, PR down.
I think so.
But meaning the communication is strategic. Because there's a lot of data that's coming out, and you have to realize how to disaggregate that data, how to disseminate that data, and get it out to the appropriate outlets in a way that's understandable for them to, like for TV stations and digital publications, for their viewers and readers to understand. Because I'm not good at science. I couldn't tell you what nothing that on that periodic table means. I couldn't, and you're throwing a whole lot of numbers at people. And, you just gotta be able to make it clear. And so often that information is coming from one person, one or two people. And you have to wait on for that one person or two people to become accessible if you want that information. And sometimes that can be tough.
Yeah.
Wow. And Steve,
yeah.
What Karanja said about verifying your facts, and it's always good to look at the source on social media and see where this come from. And it's okay to question and say, okay, this meme looks professional, but where are these facts from, and who put this out, and even what media outlet.
Right. And so to add on to your point, we've got a little conversation on the side here in the group chat. And a lot of people are, they're realizing how easy it is to, to fall for that misinformation because, as just as I said, there's a lot of numbers coming out. And it's easy to put 1 million people have died from COVID, which may be worldwide, but however, locally, the numbers might be a fraction of that. And clearly nationwide, it's about 200,000. So, you know, when you just, you know, it means they do look professional, and it's easy to slap on a logo too. Like, you know, you look, ma'am, you work for Bonheur, right?
I work for Methodist Bonheur Healthcare, which is Bonheur's part of our system.
Sorry. I mean, it's easy. I mean, let's say I found some just random numbers about children and COVID, and I just put a Bonheur logo on it. And it's easy for me to be like, Bonheur says this, and Bonheur's dealing with this, and then here we are. Bonheur's got a crisis, and they've got to figure out how to correct this. And it's going to be hard to correct, because millions of people have seen it, and even after they do correct it, there's no taking back the misinformation that's already been out there.
Well, and that goes to the technology issues too. With our greater technology now, you see videos being faked. I mean, I think there was something that went around with Joe Biden a few months ago where it was a completely fake video and it looked legitimate, and thousands of people thought it was real.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think for me, it's like journalism didn't start with the pandemic, right? So the things that I've been dealing with all along, I just keep rolling with. And like I saw one of the things on the side here talking about skepticism. That's number one. I mean, when stuff come to me, I'm skeptical. I mean, I'm like a private eye or something. Well, what is the source of this information? Where did this stuff come from? You know, and so I just try to keep it simple. And it seems to me that anytime you got a bunch of stuff going on, like a pandemic and the racism crisis and all that, you just want to keep things simple. Where did this stuff come from? What is the source of it? How can I verify it? And then I err on the side of safety, frankly. And you know, maybe some people think that I'm too conservative in that degree, but it's just like someone was saying there. I mean, once the bell is rung, it's rung, right? So,
Absolutely.
Elizabeth, I think you had a comment that you posted here. Would you like to elaborate?
Yeah, it just seems that we have gotten to a point where people are so quick to believe social media memes, but these are the same people who are questioning mainstream media. And I have nothing against questioning, but it's like you have to have a balance. Like, why are you going to believe a blogger on Facebook as opposed to the New York Times?
yeah, my thing is this though. I don't care if it's social media, if it's traditional journalism. One of the issues that we have in the Republic, one of the responsibilities is that we as individuals, whether you're a PR person or journalism or a minister, you have a responsibility to be informed about what's going on and to find out stuff. If you don't do that, then the Republic isn't going to work. And that's one of the problems that we're having here, is that people, whether you're talking about social media or anything else, they don't know how to go get information. I mean, if we got rid of social media, if we were communicating through smoke signals and stuff, we'd still have the same basic damn problem here. How do you figure out what is? You know, I mean, ethics is about a system, a framework for helping you figure out how to make sense out of issues. It doesn't tell you what's right or wrong, but it gives you a framework for that. And so one of the problems that we've had is that in this country, our framework is off. It's off, and it affects the way that we go about making decisions. And so actually, one of the good things about where we are now, going back to the topic of this discussion, what is it, ethics in an upside down world, right? So things have sort of been turned upside down, and some things are shaken out that need to be shaken out so that we can start to make better decisions here. The pandemic shows you that we have a race problem. Isabel Wilkerson says it's a caste problem, but we got a problem of long standing that goes back before the country even started. And before we got to where we are now, we were just sort of glossing over in these sort of pre-described thought patterns and making decisions that were not in our best interest. And so now we have an opportunity. We've sort of got the elephant moving here, and we have a possibility here to be able to get into our conversations. How do you go about making sense out of things? That's why I agreed to be in this particular panel, because by definition, that's what you guys are supposed to be about, right? I mean,
Right.
what does it say? We have a social responsibility to be ethical and promote a healthy dialogue with the public and build relationships with the people. That's what we got to have, and we got to have it in a mass way, and that can be done. We can actually teach people how to do what we're saying we need.
Karanja, I like your comment about keeping things simple. And of course, I'm not a math major. I'm not very good at that. That's why so many of us are in this business, I think. But in any case, I see all these reports, and I just don't like the way they're keeping a scoreboard of victims and, in terms of the, coronavirus. I saw a report last night that talked about these huge numbers of cases in New York, Florida, Texas, and California. Well, that's because those are the 4 most populous states in the country. Along with all the other facts and figures that they gave. So, context is just so important and so basic. Something I was taught by a longtime veteran of the commercial appeal who I worked with at FedEx. It is just, it's just key. Any other comments along those lines?
I do have a comment on to Karanja's point on, with the system is now shaken up. So, we're finding out the good and the bad. So it seems to me, are we now in the media world as media professionals, should we now be putting more emphasis in our work on teaching the public how to read the news and understand the news? Is that something? Because I think that's, for me, I'm mentally in my mind, I'm like, do I need to start a PSA program educating? Because I've done it with my mom, and she shared something during the pandemic on her social media that was inaccurate. And I said, Mom, the next time you share something, I want you to do these few steps. I want you to, is it a news source that you have heard of before, that you relied on before? Is it a reputable news outlet? Look at the time and the date and the month it was published. And then always, who's quoted in it? Is it a direct quote? Who's the quote coming from? And I said, and once you've done these things and kind of vetted it, then if it aligns with your moral construct, then and your beliefs, then share it. But you got to do those things. But I feel like that's something that I feel that the public is missing, and I don't know how to battle that.
Well, I think the problem, when I was saying in the chats back and forth, is the confirmation bias. If you want it to be true, if it's a political opponent that you don't care for, and if somebody puts a meme out that says exactly what you want to believe about that person, you're going to share it. You don't even want to double check it. Like we were saying before, skepticism is key here. You see something that seems questionable to you, the first thing I normally do is I Google. And if I can't find a credible source, a credible news organization, New York Times or whoever, to be a second source on this thing, then I have to question it. Problem is, Americans generally don't want to if they want it to be true. And that's a lot of what it is you find people who want that to be the case. So you just cement that in their heads, and then it begins to take a life of its own, because now people start saying, well, I saw this meme and it was here, it was cited here. And I've even seen news sources that make a news story about the fake meme, which makes no sense to me. I've never, the thing I hate the worst on television news these days, I don't see it on local news, but certainly on national news, is when they do a social media scan and they start saying, well, let's see what they're saying on Twitter about this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That kind of helps feed on itself. It helps make that the confirmation that people are looking for, the source attribution they're looking for.
Yeah.
So Milton, relative to the idea about teaching the public, the teacher can only teach what the teacher knows, right? And so the thing that I try to focus on is, okay, well, what is it that I know, and review that before I start trying to teach anybody else. And so that is specific to the organization that I run, right? And then it seems to me that in terms of journalism itself, there's plenty of room for local journalists and local journalist groups to work in concert with each other to be able to move to the teaching function. But this whole idea about teaching, you have to be a student. Mm-hmm. You have to know how to be a student. And I know for me several years ago, I just had to get into deep student mode. You know, I came out of University of Missouri, and I got a good job and all that kind of stuff, and I was doing what they told me to do. You know, my mother was a nurse's aide, my father was a garbage worker. You're supposed to get an education and get out there and get out of the neighborhood and all that kind of stuff. Well, that sort of was a framework that affected how I made decisions, and that's what your ethics does. But I ran into a body of information that caused me to have to go back and re-examine everything that I thought was true. And it's liberating in a way, but it can also be painful when you find yourself up against having to make choices that go against what you've believed your whole life, you know, from your parents and stuff. And so, I mean, you don't just go from being Leroy Williams to Karanja Ajanaku because you drank some different water, right? So you have to examine that framework. And so why I'm excited amidst all of this is that there is an opportunity here, and I see people taking advantage of this opportunity to re-examine yourself. What is it that I believe? All the way down to what you call yourself, you know, I mean, what you label yourself, what your name is. I mean, all of those things have to be re-examined, and how you come out, that's how you come out, you know, but it needs to be a fresh look at everything. You know, that's really my main lesson here. It's time for fresh looks, people. I don't care if you think you've been doing it right for all your life. In the midst of a pandemic and a racism pandemic, you need to take a fresh look. And if you need to make a change and go right at the tree rather than left, and that's what you need to do. And if you need to get some other people to go around the tree with you, then you need to get busy with it. You know.
I would also say on that note, on Milton's point and also on Karanja's point, and Montee as well, I think it's important, like you said, Karanja, you've got to be a student. And Milton, I really commend with your approach, because you're right. We all get misinformation, and it's all in the way that we handle it. I mean, there's a lack of civil discourse. Like, if you disagree with someone, we don't have to attack them. Let's have a conversation about it. Let's discuss it, especially if it's misinformation and you know it's incorrect. Yelling at somebody that they're wrong is not going to help anything, but explaining to them and encouraging them to look into it for themselves, I think gets you a lot further.
However, how and the ever, as I like to say, I've gotten to the point, me personally, and I know, you know, I might not yell at them, but I'm definitely not going to be like, I'm going to downsplain this to you so much, because at some point you just have to tell people to stop being wrong and stop being willfully wrong. You know, at some point you have to want to be teachable. And here's the thing, you know, as my friend down here in the green shirt, I'm sorry, I missed your name, my friend, but as he said, you know, that's that confirmation bias. Sometimes you want it to be true. And I've peacefully corrected people saying, hey, this is wrong. You need to correct this, or you need to take it down. Like, this is my page and I'm gonna say what I want to say. And, you know, in the age of a racial pandemic and a global health pandemic, people want things to be true so bad to fit their own narrative. And that leads to misinformation. That leads to, honestly, death in a way too, but that's neither here nor there. But people need to be more teachable, people need to be understanding. But, you know, as long as we do our jobs as the truth tellers, as journalists, as truth tellers, as storytellers, people who are supposed to be upholding things that are right and for the better of our own mankind, we have to do our part.
That's fair, Montee. I've gotten into arguments with family members before who've tried to tell me that it's all, you know, a fake pandemic. It's not, and I'm saying this as a person who looks at the numbers every single day and sees it in the hospital every day. And we had that straight up discussion of, so you're telling me you think that I don't know that this is actually happening?
And the thing is, Google is people's friend. Like, y'all pay too much to AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, and whatever company you use to not use the internet to search.
Amen.
You don't, like, nobody wants to look up things anymore. They want things to be brought to them, and they want things to be brought to them their way.
And it's so easy to do.
And it's very easy to do. You know, going back to all the points I already referenced, from me to viral posts to videos and sometimes our own journalists just run with the information because it's an easy story. It's what's the word? Low hanging fruit, and nobody's gonna, and nobody, especially in their DMA, is going to question it. And that's its own problem right there. When we don't ask the right questions, we celebrate the wrong things.
They want the simplest answer, the thing that bridges it for them and just makes it easy. Occam's razor. They want the simplest explanation, and that's the one that works best for them.
Right.
And to your point about the coronavirus numbers, I've heard some people say, well, those numbers are doctored, or there's some sort of connection to the underlying conditions. Those are more what was the more prevalent reason for the coronavirus? If that was really the primary reason the person passed away, you've probably seen that. I saw something about that on a meme where somebody said, well, only 6% of the actual deaths were really coronavirus. The rest of it was underlying conditions. And people run with that.
That's data issues in itself. But granted, yes, the data is more complicated than it seems. Like, the other day, my own news director here in Birmingham, she's been really big on us pushing recovery numbers. She's like, the research says that recovery, people want to see recovery. Well, first of all, I want to see the research. That's another thing. I need to ask that research because, and that's the thing in journalism too, especially broadcast. Your management will always tell you what people are saying, but I want to see the data that says people are saying this. And when we don't hold them accountable, we don't even hold our own newsroom accountable, then we can easily push out misinformation, misleading information. But back to my thing about, the recovery numbers. She's like, push recoveries. The thing is, here in Alabama, how many cases do we have? We have like 133 confirmed cases, 133,000 confirmed cases, and about 61,000 recoveries. They update that recovery number, the State Department of Public Health, they update that recovery number out once a week. So I asked her, hey, why are we doing all these things on recovery and these numbers only update once a week? Nothing is changing. And on top of that, the recovery rate compared to the confirmed cases rate is only 46%. So what does that leave the other 50-60% of people who have been infected? We're not putting these numbers into context, and people, that's easy information because people are saying, yay, people are recovering, but not knowing that when recovering does not mean I'm feeling all better, I'm ready to go for a 5-mile run. Recovery means that I'm still breathing, but barely. It's a lot of things. So that just goes to my goes to that point too.
Yeah. Very, very good. Let me move to another question that we have prepared, and I do want to leave room for individuals to pose their questions to our panelists. Today's charged political atmosphere. Think in terms of that for a minute. We all have our own opinions, and that's fine. We're supposed to. If we didn't, we wouldn't be alive, I think. But the code of ethics calls on us to act in the best interest of our client or employer, depending on what side of the business you're on, even to the point, and I quote, subordinating our own personal interests, close quote. And of course, we might add to that our personal opinions. Has this become more difficult for you to do in recent months?
What's that phrase? Journalism is something, everything else is PR. But essentially journalism is, they tell uncomfortable truths, especially when it's done properly. But yes, it can, I'm not a PR professional, but I am a journalist. And one of the hardest things I've had to do this past month is have to, cover in my newscast the Republican National Convention. It was very difficult. Why? Because I know it's true, and I know what a lot of people who got on that podium said was not true, and so it was hard for me to have to sift through sound bites to figure out what can I use that is not completely misleading and not completely false. And that in itself was a battle. So yes, I've had to suborn, my own thoughts, you know, just for the overall goal of the product, to appease people who I know listen, you know, to appeal to being nonpartisan, if that's really a thing.
No, it is tough. Kim, I was going to ask you, because you're in the PR profession, has there been a time when, well, there's been a time in my 21 years at FedEx, recently retired, where there was a corporate policy that I did not particularly agree with. But you just have to go forward and, you know, get in line. Kim, is that something that's happened to you?
You know, I think that you have to keep in mind, as a corporate communicator, you are directly tied to your organization. You know, some people have the benefit of they can be on Facebook or personal, and they're not tied to their employer. So you don't list your employer. It's a little bit more covered.
Great point. Excuse me, go ahead, but I want to follow up on that.
That if you, for me, I always look at it as, you know, my Facebook is my personal Facebook. I generally don't put a lot of opinions out there, just because I like to have personal conversations about things. I've never seen a Facebook argument change someone's political savvy or political party. So I do watch all of my friends and family get into those arguments, and a lot of times I shudder. But I mean, sometimes people are making points, and you have to look at those. You know, I chose my role. I chose to take this job at Methodist, and so I recognize that my opinions reflect upon my employer. So I take that responsibility on very seriously. Thankfully, I don't disagree with my employer on quite a bit, and I'm frequently very proud of the opinions that we take. I know right around the killing of George Floyd, our CEO partnered with a lot of the health systems in town to put out a op-ed piece on racism and how it will not be tolerated, and the onus on our healthcare community to take on that cause and do what we can to make real change and not just talk about change. And I was very proud to work at Methodist that day, just like many days. So I would say, knowing that, I generally have a policy, and I always tell my students that I speak to, you know, keep in mind what you post on social media. Think about how you play in 5 years, 10 years. You mature, your opinions change. You know, would you want that on the front page of the New York Times that you said that? So, I mean, we all have, thanks to apps like Time Hop, I don't know about you guys, but I see things that I posted 10 years ago, and I'm like, why did I write that? Not controversial opinion, but it's just something that it was probably not the most prudent post.
Yeah, do we find that we have, or should we be careful about what we Twitter, what we tweet, what we put on Instagram? That's what you're saying, I think, Kimberly, not just for now, because I think that would color your credibility across all the audiences. I
would say that you should, I mean, that's always good advice, is to be careful. I mean, think about what you post, think about what you're saying. And if you think that, if sometimes we post in the heat of the moment, or we're in a discussion with someone and it gets heated and we want to post something, I don't think it's ever bad advice to just think about what you're going to say, no matter what role you're in.
I can understand an opinion columnist, for example, being very opinionated on his or her social media accounts, but it's different when you have to be the honest broker, I think.
Well, and I think that's what you're posting also. I think if you're posting your political opinion, that's one thing, but if you're posting something that's offensive or hate speech, that's not okay. I mean, that should be dealt with. Yeah, I mean, it just depends on what you're posting too.
So, acknowledging, you need to be responsible in terms of what you put out there on your pages and stuff like that. But let me try to answer it a different way. That I know I have biases. I suppose there's somebody in the world who doesn't have them, but I don't know them personally. And so I know I've got biases, and so what I do is I don't play like I don't have them. I account for them, and I spend time to figure out what are they, and then I use them to my advantage. Because I'm a journalist, I know how to take my biases, account for them, and turn them into questions. From a legitimate standpoint, you can take your bias as a point of reference, and if you're talking to somebody, a candidate or whomever, then you can frame a question. But you take the attitude out of it, and you sift for basic information that you can ask a question. And then that actually turns out, in most instances, for me, that I've got a better product. I'm trying to play like I don't have these biases and things like that. I just haven't gotten there yet. You know, I'm a recovering biased, recovering racist. You know, and so you just have to, you know, you have to work with your addiction.
Yeah, Rick, I see your comment there about how you have to be very careful as a government employee too.
Very much so. Because, you know, if I'm going to appear in print as a spokesperson, and I have a lot of reporters that are friends of mine in my social media circles, I try to be very cautious, you know, even, you know, maybe in a one-on-one conversation with them. And that's what we all used to have, you know, back before social media. We would have one-on-one conversations, and reporters knew how you really felt. But if you put it somewhere where they can grab it, it could come back and bite you.
I think, Rick, that's a good point. And also you have to keep in mind, tone is really hard to tell in print writing. It's not as easy to see what your intention was, and things can be easily misconstrued, especially written in the heat of the moment.
So let me give you an experience that I had once. I used to cover state government for the Commercial Appeal. And so I went to cover state government about the same time I was going through my transition, and had come across a new body of research. And I was pretty certain that I had come up with a body of information that Governor McWhorter needed. That I just thought that he just didn't have enough information to be able to deal with the prison situation. He didn't know enough about the people up in there. And I had come up with been exposed to some information that I thought he needed to know, right? And so I'm working for the Commercial Appeal, but I'm a human being, and I've got this information. So what do you do, right? So I started sending the governor notes to say, hey man, I need to talk with you about something, right? And so eventually I get into the office there. I don't know if you guys remember Governor McWhorter, but he looked like Hearst Cartwright, you know, just a big imposing kind of guy.
Boss hog.
I started talking to him about you know, the research, and that, hey man, you don't know who these people are in here, but you can know. And if you would adjust and look at this, well, you know, that was the right thing to do because I had the information, I thought, but there are a lot of people thought it was the wrong information because of what I do as a journalist. Well, I knew that on the front end. I knew I had to make a decision about that. And so I decided, you know, just looking upon my experiences, I've seen a number of journalists have conversations with news sources. They weren't talking about something as heavy as this, but I decided to, you know, that for me, that was the line that I was going to fall on that side of the line. And so my point is this, that this thing about ethics, you know, there are rules relative to industries and policies and stuff like that. But in the end, it gets down to you, you know, and what decision are you going to make based upon the research you've done and what price you're prepared to pay for it. And I paid the price on that one, I'll say that, but I don't regret it, you know. And so everybody has to do that. You got to decide what's important for you, you know, as you're examining your ethical framework. What's important for you, and what price are you prepared to pay, particularly now when there's an opportunity, it seems, to bring about fundamental change and have the world right side up, at least relatively speaking.
Kim, did you have a comment? Kim, did you have a comment?
No, I don't.
I thought I saw you raising your hand there. Okay.
No,
Well, thank you all very much. Let's take some time for our panelists to take questions from the rest of our audience, not in the studio, but they're with us just the same. And you have any questions for our panelists today? Or comments or ideas?
I have one. What are you, just randomly, how do you guys think the media landscape will evolve in the future? What do you think? You know, I think in the last 20 years, it's been the transition from print media to online. So what do we see predictions on what might be next?
Interesting to
Go ahead.
we're experiencing right now with COVID-19. I mean, just in the last, you can look at eras, like the era of Cronkite, the Gutenberg press, but I mean, just in the last year with Zoom and, you know, because of safety protocols, we're working a lot closer with reporters on providing them content. So photos from inside the hospital, whereas, you know, a year ago, they would have wanted to kind of collect their own. So I think there's a greater trust between the communications team and the reporters. And they're trusting us to provide them, you know, transparent content. We're providing them information, numbers. But so there's a greater trust because they can't physically be there in person. So I think that's an interesting development that might not have happened without COVID-19.
Yeah, I think I can attest to that change that Kim's talking about. We were sort of forced, because of the smallness of our operation, to sort of move toward that even before there was a pandemic, in terms of adjusting our relationships with PR people and that sort of thing. And so I'm not afraid. In fact, I encourage information directly from PR sources, a lot of times almost in story form, and in part because I trust me. You know, I know how to cull information and adhere to the journalism standards that, you know, that I stick with. In terms of the transition, we too have changed. For years, we were at the downtown there on top of Alfred's. We're at the 1st of October, we won't be there anymore. We're going to be in a much smaller operation in terms of our base. Most of us are working from a social standpoint. I mean, from a remote standpoint, we're going to continue that for some time. But we're also, in terms of the evolution of it, you know, we a long time ago got out of the idea that we were a weekly newspaper, right? So, you know, we're a multi-platform content generator, and we're finding different ways to do that. We'll be coming out with something that we call TSD TV here in the next couple of weeks, where we have a line of different podcast shows on different subject matters, and that's going to become sort of a staple for us. And so one thing is that we know that we're going to stay in business. And so how do I know that? Number one, we had to get our house in order from a business standpoint. And the pandemic gave us an opportunity to accelerate moving on that need. So we're much more sound in that way. But I think also that it's just an exciting time for me as far as journalism is concerned. You know, we at the Tri-State Defender, we've been in business since 1951, and we came into business specifically to serve the African-American community. It doesn't mean that we serve the African-American community with this idea that no one else exists in the city and the county, right? And so we focus on telling what's going on in the city and the county, specifically through the African-American community. And so it seems to me that our stock has gone up. You know, because things have turned upside down, that niche audience that we've been locking in on, and now others are seeing a heightened value for that. We actually think that's good. You know, we're not trying to monopolize not trying to not monopolize it. We just want people to get it right and to learn how to live together. And the more that you know about each other, and the different vehicles that can help get that information out, the better off that you are. So in that regard, I think that I'm actually encouraged about where we are as a newspaper and as a content generator, but really as the industry itself. And I know that runs sort of against the grain of a lot of thoughts, but I'm okay with where we're headed. I'm not sure exactly what the elephant's gonna look like, but I'm sure the elephant's gonna keep going.
Thank you. Kim, I saw you shaking your head.
I agree with what Karanja's saying, and I think that it's important as communicators and PR people, we have to respect that that's a trust that the media is putting with us. And that's where the code of ethics comes in especially handy, because you want to make sure that the information you're providing is absolutely accurate and fair. You know, we're not putting out puff pieces. We're putting out genuine information we want the public to have, because we're serving the greater good.
And I think let me just add one point. I'm not sure that we've accented enough. We get things wrong, right? And part of journalism ethics is accountability. And when we get things wrong, we have to hold ourselves accountable. We have to address that. You know, we have to make sure that we address it. And so I don't want that to be lost in the process. We're not perfect. I'm not perfect. I got a good process.
Yeah.
But I make mistakes, and they're painful. You know, I mean, if you're really serious about your business, I know I am. I stay up at night over little bitty things. They seem little, you know, just little things. People say, man, you need to look. This business is serious here, you know. And so accountability. Let me just put my.
You anticipated my fourth prepared question. Montee, go ahead. You were saying?
No, I mean, yeah, it was going to lead into the next question. You know, about about making corrections. Hell, I get nervous over a typo, so I feel Karanja too, Dr. Karanja, as well. But you know, bringing it to his point, you know, journalists, we do make mistakes, and we do have to be accountable for when we make those mistakes, and we have to correct them as soon as we can. Because I mean, most people understand that journalists, they don't get everything right. They know they don't. But you know, however, an error is usually simple to make, and when you correct the error, in most cases, it's usually good, because that plays into your credibility too, saying, hey, this happened, this is what we thought it was, but please charge it to our head and not to our heart. That kind of thing.
Right.
And I think that last part is key, the heart part, because that's part of the journalism ethics. It's the humanity. I mean, are you out to do harm with this information? And that ought not to be hard to determine. I mean, you ought to be able to know what your motives are, and whether or not you're trying to hurt people with the information. And sometimes information can't hurt, but uh-oh, did we lose? Okay. Something happened to my screen there. Am I still there?
Yeah,
You're still
sorry, we're just sharing the screen. You're still there talking.
Yeah. So, but I mean, and so sometimes you can share information and it will hurt, but it's the motive, right? I mean, did you try to hurt somebody? And that I do have some concern about some elements of journalism today, because I wonder sometimes what I'm watching and am I reading? I mean, where's the humanity here? You know, I mean, it seems to be couched in such a way where it's out to harm, and that part is troubling to me.
Mm-hmm. I mean, in going back to Dr. Ajanaku's, following up on Dr. Ajanaku, what he had to say, you know when information is being put out there to harm people, you know. I mean, you just know when things are just being published to be malicious and to be messy. And sometimes news is messy. It just is the way of the world. But however, you know, based off the outlet and possible agendas that somebody may have, especially from a said reporter, that they're out to do this for a reason, for own personal gain. And journalism should never be that way. It really shouldn't, because I mean, you're supposed to be objective, and people trust you. People are supposed to trust you, and how can they trust you if you're out here willing to do dirt under the premise of providing a service?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Credibility and context, I'd say, are king. Mm-hmm. We are close to the end of our hour here, and I wanted to give Sheila a chance to bring the meeting to a close. And
hold on one second.
Hey,
did we already have this question about that somebody asked about blogger being journalists?
Nope, that hasn't been answered.
Okay, I'll answer that real quick, and then we can bring this to you.
Okay, sure.
Yes and no. And I say that because most blogs have their own frame of agenda, and most blogs appeal to certain people. So can they have reliable sources? Yes. Are they journalists? In a sense, but not traditionally. Can they be trusted? Yeah, it's a slope. It really is a slope, because nowadays anybody can be called a journalist just because you have a website and an iPhone camera.
And a phone. And a camera.
And so just because you know how to put together a paragraph does not make you a journalist. There's a lot more. There's a lot more to it than just putting, just slapping a couple words together and calling it a story and hitting publish, and then hoping that people see it and then people buy into your content. It's easy to create content, but content that requires vetting There's a problem. And most bloggers, they're not held accountable to anybody but themselves.
Right.
Which means that if they get something wrong, hey, it is what it is. They still got their clicks, they still got their posts, and whoever wants to believe it can believe it. And the thing is that people are still gonna come to their website day after day after day. But all right, that's my take.
You're so right. Well, thank you, Dr. Ajanaku. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Montee, for being a part of our panel today. We're so appreciative, and you brought so many good insights, helpful insights. And I'll not sign off, but I'll give the floor back to Sheila and to Milton, and let them do their promo bits as we conclude. Thanks so much, and thanks to all of you for joining.
My pleasure.
Sure.
Right. Thanks, Steve. Well, I don't have much to add to that. It was been a great discussion and very thought provoking. And I kept wanting to chime in like, oh, I did that, but I think we probably all are thinking about our experiences and how these have affected us. I don't have much. I know there's a slide about our membership. We're having a new member coffee and chat next week. Milton, is there anything more you want to talk about or talk about that more?
No, that's it. Just please email Elizabeth if anybody's looking to attend. We would love to connect with any new members that are on here today. And please, if we also potentially will have some more positions available. So please look out for that email to come out. And that's it.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Milton members are going to receive that email also about the coffee chat.
Yes.
The coffee and chat. Cool.
Great.
All right.
And Elizabeth, did you want to add anything about membership? I see your slide.
Yeah. All right, everybody. I think that's it.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Bye. Take care, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you
This
all.
was great.
Milton? Oh, you had something to say?
Oh, no, I was just saying thank you all. This was
All
great.
Thank you all. All right.
Well,
Thanks so
care.
much. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks so much, guys.